friends! Right, so today I'm going to answer this question that somebody asked me on Twitter, and then I asked them to put it on my AMA, which is what I always do pretty much if it's anything more than like 3 words answers. So they have this code sandbox, and they have this interceptor thing. The way that it's used is in their app, they just say interceptor. I'm not sure why it's not showing up here. It should be rendering, I think. There we go. And then you click to fetch, and it does some sort of fetch thing. I don't think that the demo actually is working. I think it's all mocked and stuff. But yeah, so what they're rendering is this interceptor, and this interceptor is going to be like making some global changes to their to axios. So here we are using axios interceptors request use, and then you get your auth interceptor, and you can add or remove it. And they are cleaning up after themselves by adding the auth and adding the error interceptor, and then removing and both of those in this use effect. So that's good. They're actually returning a fragment. You could just return null instead. That works fine. And yep, and then that still works. So but I don't think that this is a good idea, and I'll tell you why. What if somebody just decided they wanted to render this interceptor just anywhere in the app? They want to render it here, they want to render it somewhere else, like all over the place. You're adding a bunch of interceptors to Axios globally. So I don't think that's a great idea. What I would recommend is instead make this interceptor let's see, we'll do context interceptor equals react.create context, and then and actually you'd make axios.create, and then you do your configuration. That's going to be my axios, and then this my axios is what you're going to be attaching all the interceptors to, and then you just access it through context. So that's how I would build this. I'm not going to talk too much more about that in this video, because I don't have a ton of time today. And the question was about how to test something like this. But I just thought I would mention that. It would actually probably make it a little bit easier to test to do it that way as well, because then you could provide like a fake version of Axios a little easier. So yeah, anyway, so how do you test this? Well, it just occurred to me that it might be better to download this instead. So we're gonna pop this open, and I'll get this downloading Axios interceptor. We'll get that running while I kind of talk through my thinking process here. So this is a component. The way that it's going to be used is a component, and so that's how we're going to test it. A big mistake that people make is they try to like call this function or something and mock out all of the hooks that are going to be used, so they do nothing or whatever. That's not a great idea. Also, it looks like we're using a store here that's going to be managing, like it looks like it's a Redux-like thing that uses the reducer. So how is that going to be used? Let's see. We've got our store. Let's see. Use store and use actions, and then instead of our index, we're rendering the store provider. So that's great. Yeah, that looks fine. The way that is built out. Yeah, we've got our state provider, dispatch provider. That's interesting. What are these? We're going to have a context for state, dispatch, and actions. Use dispatch, give you back dispatch. And that's interesting. Okay, I guess, and then actions, that value is just the static object. So here's what I'd recommend. Don't use this actions provider thing. Yeah, I'm struggling to see where that would be valuable. Just make this a module. That's what I would suggest. Yeah, I would just make that a module, and you import it wherever you need. And I would probably just combine all of these to a single like store provider that as the value provides state and dispatch. That way you don't have 3 different, well, see here we export default that, and then we export these 3 different hooks that I think you just have 1 hook. But anyway, so that's the way that it's working today. So how do we test this interceptor? Well, we're going to need to render it inside of the store provider. So let me see if we can get this up and running. Do we even have Jest in here? Yeah, I was worried about that. So another little tip is rather than using the parcel like vanilla sandbox thing, I'm gonna move this over to a create React app sandbox thing. So let's see, what's the best way to do this? I wonder, actually, let me just test something out really quick. That totally works. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this source stuff, we're gonna copy all this, we're gonna move it over here into, oh, we're there. Uploading files, ta-da. Isn't that rad? I just think that's rad. Okay, so our index is wrong though, so because that was overridden, so I'm gonna copy all this right there. Cool, and then we'll add axios as a dependency. And sometimes Code Sandbox doesn't load. It's like the theme correctly, so the theme is all wrong. So I just got to refresh, and that'll fix it. Okay, and we'll install that thing. I think I still will probably need to download this thing, so we're gonna download it again, and we're just refresh again, I guess. Oh, you know what? I knew it. I always forget. So I have the short URL RCS that will take me to a special code sandbox that's already like set up for me and everything, all nice. And sometimes I forget to fork it before I start making a bunch of changes, which is kind of annoying. So I gotta fix it to remove all this nonsense I don't want. Okay, so maybe we're getting the wrong app or something. Yeah, root, not app. So I'll go here. We want root. That'll get us rendering. Sweet. Now we're all squared away. Let me just fix this thing so it's no longer, dang it, function app return hello. We'll just render the app. We'll get rid of this store provider and the app thing. And this is going to be root. Okay, and that needs a comma. And then we'll get rid of this. Got to clean all this mess up that I made. That, this, and all that. This, and one last thing, that. Sweet, now we're back in a good place for my default code sandbox. Okay, so back to this thing. We are, yeah, we want to test this. I think I got it downloaded, right? I'm gonna cd into React code sandbox. We'll yarn this thing. I'm gonna close this one. That's the old one that doesn't have what I want. This. Oh, I think I opened that twice. Okay, cool. And we'll get that up in my editor. Okay, cool. So we've got our stuff. Our interceptor is what we want to test. So I'm going to add a new file, interceptor.js. And here we're going to import React because we're going to be rendering React from React. Let me double check. I'm pretty sure I've got testing a library. There it is. Oh, but it's an old version. I need to update my code sandbox. I have 6.0.0. We'll yarn that thing too. And we'll import render from React testing library. And I'm gonna also, just for the fun of it, import React testing library, clean up after each. Don't need to worry about that. And do we have just DOM in here? Yeah. Extend expect. Sweet. Typically you'll do that in your setup file, but we're just gonna do that here. Setup test, yes. Do that there. Okay, cool. If you have interceptors running for all my, if I have interceptors running for all my requests, is it reasonable to just unit test interceptor functions with mock values? Yeah, well, so I'm not totally sure I'm following the question. here's probably what I would do is I would take all of this stuff. See, this isn't even accepting, I guess it's using the store, and it's using auth access token and that stuff. Yeah, what I was gonna say is, and what you might do is I might make a function, make auth interceptor, and this will take auth, and then here we'll just like return the auth interceptor. That's probably how I'd write this. But let's keep going with what we've got, and we'll just see how we would test this as a component. So we'll test, and our test is going to say auth interceptor adds, what do we need? The access token for is a CME domain URLs. So it adds the authorization header, adds header to axios config. Cool. So we're gonna say render or interceptor 2. And because this is a bit side effecty, we're actually not going to take what we get back from interceptor because it returns null. So it's just doing side effects. Those side effects are these add auth interceptor and error interceptor. And so we're not actually going to get anything back, but we also don't want to actually make axios requests. So what I'm going to do is I'll say jest.mock axios, and we're going to mock out all the methods from axios that we're using. So let's find that out. We've got axios interceptors, request and response, and that's pretty much it. So interceptors, request, and that has a use and eject. Okay, so we're going to say use, or that's an object, use jest function, and eject is a jest function, and then we'll do the same thing for response. Okay, cool. We need to get that interceptor here. Import interceptor from interceptor. Okay. So Tiago is asking, hey, how would you test if the Apollo mutation component was called? Here's what I would do. jest.mock Apollo, whatever the path to the mutation component is, and jest function. Boom. And then just assert, and then you'd import that mutation component like normal, whatever you do there, and then expect that to be rendered properly. That's what I do. Maybe you can ask on my AMA if you have more specific questions or want me to give you a more specific answer there. Okay, sweet. So we're rendering the interceptor, and let's go ahead and we'll just start the test here. I've got nrt alias to npm run test. Sweet. Cannot read property auth of undefined. So we do, in fact, need to render things within the store because this is the auth, and yeah, cannot read. It is property auth of undefined. Oh, right. So we're destructuring undefined. That's the error that's happening right there. So let's import store provider from store. What I'm going to do is actually, there are two things we could do. We could put it right there, and boom. We could do it that way. That works fine, but I'm going to do it like this instead. Wrapper equals children, store provider. Actually, we'll just take, yeah, well, children. Okay, now the benefit to doing this is I can now make a function called render interceptor. Take our UI, or yeah, render with providers. Actually, we'll just call it render, then we'll alias this as RTL render. Okay, so we're going to make our own render that takes some options. That's going to, return a call to RTL render. Actually, we don't need these. It's these there. And that's going to take our UI. Well, actually, it's just going to do this. I think. That's these options. Okay. So what's cool about that is now I can just call render without providing anything. I just know that it's going to be wrapped inside the store provider, and you can put your theme provider and all your other magical providers in there, and that works fine. Oh yeah, and then we got to take these options. So we'll say cool. So now we can, and actually I'm going to go interceptor right there. And I'm going to expect, wait, we're going to need axios as well. Import axios from axios. And we'll expect axios.interceptors.request.use to have been called times 2. So it gets called twice. It is called only once. Let's find out why. Oh, that might be response. Yeah, so we have one for the request to use, and then one for the response. That's for the error interceptor. So it's going to be called once, and response.use to be called once. Okay, cool. And actually, I'm going to get back unmount from here, and we'll call unmount, and then we'll expect the eject to have been called. Okay, cool. Called twice. Uh-oh. Request.eject. Eject. Aha, I caught a bug. This is a, yeah, there we go. This should be response. Because we're using it for the response over here, but then we were removing it from the request. And so that was a memory leak. Yikes. Good thing we caught that bug. That's why we do this, I guess. Okay. But that's not what this test was. So I'm going to rename this test and we'll add a new one. So interceptor adds interceptors to the request and response and cleans up in unmount or when unmounted. Okay, cool. So now we're going to test the auth interceptor adds authorization header. This is probably the last thing I'll have time for today. So we're going to do that render magic. And between tests, we're going to want to make sure to clean up axios. So we're going to say before each, we'll say axios dot, here we'll just do this whole thing. Except we're not going to make an assertion. Instead, we're going to say mock reset. Boom. Okay. And we'll also do that for the eject form also. Okay, so then, by the way, these assertions are sort of good. I might also add this to have been called times 0 to make sure that we're not cleaning up immediately. And it's not really asserting any of the behavior, so this would not be a good test by itself. It only is a good test because we have other tests that are verifying the actual behavior of those things. So then we're gonna say we want auth.access token to have a value. So let's take a look at the way this store is built, because we need to give access token a value. We have some mocking going on here, but you wouldn't typically do this in a real app, right? You wouldn't have that root initial state mocked out like that. The way that this would normally be is we'll just do that. Access token is nothing or probably null. This token, is that being used anywhere? No. So I'd probably initialize that to null. And it looks like there's no way to set the access token. So we're going to add, to sign in state.auth. Okay, so we'll add a authenticate, and this is going to take a payload, very Redux type like authenticate payload, and then we'll take that action. We'll have case for authenticate and return and access token is action payload action or access token, right? Token, haha. Okay, so that's probably how I would do something like that. But it occurs to me now that it'd probably be even better if this store provider could accept a value or would just take other props. And okay, so listen, make this one provider. This is what I'm gonna do. We're gonna say, well, I don't have time to rewrite all this, but what I would say is make this a store provider. This takes props. It's going to return our store dot provider. And we'll just render props across, and we'll put our value is the state and dispatch that we get back from use reducer. Okay, so I'd probably do reducer staff was use reducer, root reducer, and root initial state, and we'll pass that as is. And then people can get the actions just because it's a module. It's just a static object. So yeah, just use it as a module. They can get dispatch because it's the second thing from there. That's probably how I would write this. But I'm not going to worry about rewriting all of that stuff. And the reason that this is really valuable is now props can have a value and override what that value is. And that's why this matters. So what we're going to do instead is I'm going to say, spread props over there. So now I can override the value of the state, which will work just fine for our purposes. So I'm going to add a new option, say options. This will be our state. And we'll say value equals. And if you did it my way, then you'd say an array right here with the state and a fake dispatch thing. But since we're not doing it my way, we'll just pass the state directly. Like that, and now we're overriding things, which is nice. And yeah, sweet. So now our interceptor or our render method here can take a state option, and I'm going to have an auth with an access token of fake token. Okay, and do state of undefined. We got to default that, and we get a big honking error. Cannot read property auth of undefined. I'm guessing that's because this state is over. Huh, that's weird. It shouldn't be doing that because state in for this test, state will be undefined. And so therefore value would be undefined, and therefore this merge should work just fine. I don't have time to dig into this, but I've done this and it works fine, so I'm not sure or we'll skip that one. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but you can figure that one out. Okay, sweet. So now this interceptor, yeah, it's just intercepting requests that match this acme.com. And so we're going to make a request and then verify that the config has that header attached to it, I guess. I'm not exactly sure how to do that. So we'll just see, like, I don't know how axios handles that. So what we'll do is we'll say axios.get, I don't know, acme.com. We'll say https/API/ fake endpoint. Or here we'll, yeah. Yeah, this one's kind of tricky. So we want to have a just function that's a get. And this is probably where the question came from. Is okay. So this, if I'm going to mock out how axios.get works, then it's never actually going to run my code because I'm mocking out axios get. Yes, very, very tricky indeed. So let's dive into axios. Of course, it's going to take me to the typings because it hates me. Okay, it's all webpacked. That's fun. Take a look at the lib really quick. So because we're running this in Node, it's oh, actually no, we're running with JS DOM, so it's probably following the browser side of things. Wow, it is not a small package, even though, yeah. Yeah, lots of stuff going on here. Rats. Yeah, mocking out the entire Axios package is making this tricky. Let me think about this just for a sec. What I'm thinking the best course of action is to, yeah, this is what I'll do. We'd make a special function here called make auth interceptor. That's going to take auth, and then it's going to return thing. Okay. And then here we're going to say, oh, yeah, okay. So then here we'll say with auth. And then we'll, you can put this in another module, but we could also just export this. And then instead of doing this rendering magic here, I'm going to say make auth interceptor, which I'm going to pull from here. And we'll call it with our own auth. Well, this is going to be an object that has an access token, fake token, interceptor. And then we're going to call the interceptor with some configs, config headers, config.url. So this is going to be URL is https acme.com, that's a d.com/API. And yeah, I think that's all that we really need. And then we'll get our config back and we'll expect config dot headers, right? Yeah, headers authorization to be fake token. Okay, it needs to have headers also. Headers. Okay, may have spelled something wrong. Oh, this needs to be. Oh, no, that's right. Let's just take a look at the config here really quick. Okay. So it's not logging in here. I'm probably not matching that that regex properly. So we're just gonna have it return true, or because I figure your URLs are gonna be correct. But yeah, anyway, then we get to that. Once you get the proper URL, whatever matches that regex, then you're gonna get your config back and you can assert that the config is correct. This is probably how I'm going to end with this test. If I were writing this myself, I would have a make auth interceptor and test it in isolation, mostly because Axios is typically the thing that I'm mocking out, and so It might work out if you use axios.create, like I was suggesting at the beginning, and then mock out axios.get, because I'm not sure, but maybe axios instances calls axios.get ultimately, and then you can verify that the config is correct. But I don't have any time to verify that myself. So anyway, so hopefully that's helpful. I do recommend testing the component itself. I also recommend that the component not be just something that makes side effects happen and changes axios, but instead it creates an axios instance, adds the interceptors to that axios instance, and then provides that via a context provider. And then anyone who wants to use that will use it via a custom hook that's like use axios or use fetch or something. So anyway, I hope that's helpful, and yeah, I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.